times of grief, I am often driven to places creatively and aesthetically that I don't stray toward. When you're upset about a loss in your life, you want to be anywhere but where you are. Escaping is not the answer, but it can sometimes help us forget for just a moment the circumstances we are in. Movies, throughout my life, but more recently upon starting this channel, have been that source of fulfillment and sometimes escape. Oddly enough, I am driven to movies that sometimes just make me feel bad. Why that is, I don't know. It could come from being in a place of privilege. I'm often told that it's easier for a white man to enjoy horror movies and feel scared because I don't live in a constant world of fear and danger like women and people of color. While this is true, there are so many horror fans that are women and people of color. And often horror movies cater to those audiences that are left out from the film status quo. Still, I am drawn to movies that can be categorized as bad vibes. I was introduced to the idea of a bad vibes horror movie by a friend not too long ago when I recommended he check out Child's Play 2, my favorite of the Chucky films. Upon finishing it, his review said that the film just felt bad. I thought, how could that be? It's Chucky. He's kind of funny. How's it hanging, Phil? It's got great one-liners, awesome kills, and an iconic finale for a horror film. What's not to like? But then I started thinking about how the movie revolves around a killer doll who is at his very angriest in the entire franchise here, stalking and torturing physically, emotionally, and mentally Andy, who's still a small child at this point. He's been separated from his mother and placed into a dollhouse-like foster home with no one to believe him about Chucky. That is kind of bad vibes if you ask me. So I started thinking, what other movies might fall under that label? And also, what movies are bad vibes that I find to be some of my favorite movies of all time? Exorcist 3 comes to mind, and not only does that movie just feel terrifying, it doesn't leave you feeling very good afterwards. It's incredibly disturbing, also starring the voice of Chucky, Brad Dourif, funny enough. But when I think of Exorcist 3, I think of it positively. I even recommend it pretty often as one of my top 10 horror movies of all time.
Well, yeah, this is probably a little late for an intro, but this is Curtis Reviews. If you're so inclined to stick around, please hit that subscribe button. Here on my channel, I try to focus more on the feelings and emotions that movies leave behind, as opposed to the what's good and what's bad. Now, let's move on.
This is all to say, I've been in a dark place recently. I have felt waves of anger, regret, guilt, and shame. April felt like the longest month of my life. I've wanted to quit my job and gotten close to losing my cool at work. I haven't worked on a script for my channel until this one, and even then, I could easily close my laptop right now and go back to playing Final Fantasy VII. Bills and credit card charges are piling up, and we are just expected to go on as if life is normal. The gaping hole in our hearts and seemingly nothing to fill it.
Enter Rob Zombie. Hold on, don't turn off the video yet. I promise this is gonna be good. After watching the Devil's Rejects retrospective video on the In Praise of Shadows YouTube channel, which I highly recommend because all of their videos are so top-notch and just brilliant, I was inspired to give Zombies movies a shot. I was in that camp of people who was like, Rob Zombie's kind of cringe, his movies don't seem that good, but I'd never actually watched any of them or formed my own opinion.
One day after sobbing into a towel, I decided to throw on House of a Thousand Corpses. And the moment I saw Sid Haig's face soaked in grease paint, his gnarled black teeth grinning from ear to ear, I felt a sense of ease for the first time in weeks. There was a calming presence to the movie. Its jagged edges and haunted house aesthetic were alluring. It felt like a dime horror novel, frayed and burnt at the ends. But with each page, each frame of the movie beckoned me to keep going. I had to see where these wacky characters would go. But all in all, House of a Thousand Corpses isn't intended to make you feel good. It's intended to poke and prod, to upset you. Its visceral gore and violence, the unfathomably chaotic and crazed nature of its Texas Chainsaw-esque family, it is all there to make you sick to your stomach and turn off your screen. Rob Zombie is goading you to give in with a wink and a nod. And still, I couldn't help but feel at home in the House of the Firefly family during my grieving process. There is something so soothing about seeing characters unfold on screen that are so untethered from the expectations of clean, polished society. During a time where I want to rip my own skin off and set fire to my life, House of a Thousand Corpses offered an outlet for that anger and pain. Maybe that makes me sound a little crazy, but there is a rage that Rob Zombie harnesses so well that helped me through such a difficult time.
Rage is a feeling that I hadn't yet felt in the grieving process. While I felt angry with my father when he did commit suicide back in 2015, the rage that I've experienced recently has been more pure and unbridled. I'll feel my synapses flare and my heart palpitate. imagining blood shooting from my fingertips into the throat of some unwitting fool who cut me off on the expressway.
Of the zombie films I watched over the past week, The Devil's Rejects and Halloween 2 captured this feeling for me perfectly. Bill Moseley's Otis is much more fully realized as a character in Rejects, playing less a Chop Top ripoff from Texas Chainsaw 2 and more an unhinged Charlie Manson kind of killer. In particular, his scenes in the desert to go find the guns and the motel room are some of the more haunting moments in a horror movie I've ever seen. The chaotic aggression he harnesses is addictive. I wanted to throw up after that movie. Sure, the finale kicks ass and all, but what did I just watch? And why was I not able to peel my eyes from the screen the entire time? I noticed that in between viewings of these movies, my depression and anxiety didn't completely subside. In hindsight, maybe zombies movies weren't really the best comfort watch while I was going through the grieving process. Maybe they further untapped me. I grew more inward and had trouble talking about anything but the uncorked power of his movies. While there is a plethora of content online that does this already, my greatest revelation watching Rejects, House of a Thousand Corpses, and Three from Hell is the treasure that was Sid Haig, and what has become one of my favorite scenes in a horror movie ever. Sid's iconic Captain Spaulding is on the run from the police. His truck dies, he walks up on an unknowing family thinking a friendly clown is stopping to say hello. The composition of this shot is excellent. The contrast of the desert sun on Captain Spaulding's makeup, the sheer glee of the performance from Haig and the smiling terror of the child as he threatens to kill their entire family. I wanted more of this Captain Spaulding guy. In just a few brief moments here, Haig is utterly terrifying, going from friendly clown on patrol to crazed killer, from 0 to 100. It's also worth mentioning that a lot of the horror in this movie happens during the day. While I'm sure the comment section will correct me, I don't know that at this point in time, which would have been 2005, that we were getting horror movies where horrific things were happening in broad daylight. I mean, the most modern movie that comes to mind for me is Midsommar by Ari Aster. Worth noting, at least.
That's grief. That's pain. You could just be sitting at your desk one day typing up an email to some idiot in another state who needs help with some hapless task, and then it hits you, and you're crumpled up in a ball on the floor, your phone ringing off the hook, and your boss wanting those numbers stat. How does one go on living? The hair trigger reactions of the Firefly family is similar to how I felt dealing with so much internal pain. I feel more unstable than I've ever felt before in my life. Three from Hell, while I think it may be a more competent movie in some ways than The Devil's Rejects, pales in comparison to Rejects as a whole. There's not enough Sid Haig, which is really no one's fault due to Rob Zombie's production schedule and the fact that Sid Haig's health was taking a big dip during this time. And while Richard Brake is a nice addition as Otis's long-lost half-brother, he cannot and shouldn't be expected to fill the space left by Sid Haig's Captain Spaulding.
Three from Hell, more so than Rejects and House, feels the most hangouty of the bunch. This led to a strange, cozy feeling that the other movies had, but to a greater extent. It's kinda nice watching Baby, played by Sherry Moon Zombie, saunter up to the soda machine and run upon a stupid kid in a poncho and a fake mustache. We know what's gonna happen, and there's something kind of funny about it. This is also the movie where I really started to like Sherry Moon's style of acting. Rejects was close, but not quite. Three from Hell gets a certain sweet spot that I really enjoyed. But what is it really about these Rob Zombie movies that were so comforting? What did I find so alluring and eminently watchable about them? There's a few core words I've mentioned, but I'll break them down here to explain. This will lead us into the final argument for why Bad Vibes movies are incredibly important to the movie canon, but horror especially. 1. Rage. 2. Anarchy and lack of organization. 3. Violence. 4. Family as organization. We all experience rage, whether it be behind the wheel of a car or after losing a loved one. We all wish we could be the ones to blow up the system and start everything over, but then our lunch break is up and we have to clock back into work. There's not really a chance in hell we can just go kill that one person or thing that's causing us pain because we could go to jail. But for the Firefly family, there are no rules. We love watching their paths unfold on screen because they have no code. The only thing they follow is mayhem. They are grimy, sick, and disgusting. They are the embodiment of the American dream, living in their truth and embracing themselves in the same way a white girl doing yoga and drinking yerba mate would utter the same sentiment. Violence is rampant in America. Everything gets sterilized, but in the liminal spaces of zombies movies, motels, and gas stations, we get to see the pockets of terror that we all try to avoid flipping channels on the boob tube. The other thing that Grief will teach is that there is not always a reason for why things happen, or have to happen. Things aren't linear. Sometimes a clown smacks a woman unconscious, threatens to kill her son, and commits Grand Theft Auto, all with a smile on his face. There is no reason why bad things may happen. There was mention of no code, but rarely in the Firefly trilogy do we see any family members lashing out at their own kin with anything but crass language. These deranged folks love each other and will seemingly go the distance to free them from their confines, like little living gods of destruction and horror tucked in on the couch with their TV dinners and the Andy Griffith Show. While Zombie doesn't really mind the family drama that he could, and the movies aren't really about that, it would be interesting to see where that kind of angle may have gone if he didn't make the movies in the way that he did.
When you are experiencing uncomfortable emotions with no outlet for them to go, it can feel like a geyser building up inside of you. When Zombie's characters stab, shoot, and attack, there was a loosening in my internal gears that allowed me to unclench for a moment. I got to see people unleash some kind of rage on screen, and by sort of living vicariously through them, it allowed a little bit of a release for me too, which I may be a bit embarrassed to admit. There may be some people who know me or people who don't that might be a little disturbed to hear me sharing feelings like this, but it is something that I found some comfort in. And let me be clear, I do not want to commit serial murder like the Firefly family, but I do more so understand the appeal of movies that are more exploitative and violent for just the sake of it. I'm not necessarily making a case that we need more of these movies, or that we should watch more movies that make us sick, but I do think that being uncomfortable can lead us to places both creatively and metaphorically that can be beneficial to our emotional intelligence. Or maybe I sound crazy. Who cares?
It's also worth mentioning that taking in this kind of violence and anger can really impact you. I mentioned feeling kind of depressed and anxious even after watching the movies and feeling some kind of comfort from them. But in an interview, when Rob Zombie was asked if he might be glorifying violence in his movies, he said, "Maybe, but I never hear about it, because I don't think that's true. If it is true, I don't think it matters. It's fake. It's not real. The rules of real life don't apply to art. That's why art exists. If we're gonna run every movie through the PC filter, then in American History X, Edward Norton can't be racist. We don't have a movie. The rules of real life are different. For fiction, there can't be rules." And while I do agree with his words, I do think that taking in this kind of distance violence can mess with your mind. I think the grief I'm already coping with had me on hair trigger, but when my fiance and I would go on walks to clear our heads after work, I'd find myself a little more tense than usual, and it was after watching a chunk of Devil's Rejects. That's all to say that disconcerting cinema, while not necessarily the dictionary definition of feel good, can still make your real life feel bad. I won't spend any more of the video touting off how violent content may have an impact on your mental health, but that's because there's countless research articles and videos out there that will do it better. I did find it important to indicate that, for me at least, violent content can be both comforting but deeply disturbing. It contributed to tension already in my life while coping with grief.
At this point, the video's been going for a while, so I just want to take another moment to say, hey, if you want to subscribe to my channel, if you're enjoying this video, please do. It really helps us out. Don't forget to like it, and if you leave a comment, that's really helpful too. It keeps us in the algorithm, and based on the movies that I'm discussing, YouTube's probably gonna try to bury this pretty quickly. So you liking, commenting, and subscribing is a huge help, and thank you so much for watching this video so far.
Halloween 2 is the last piece of the zombie puzzle until we move into some more modern examples of bad vibes movies. While I didn't hate his first Halloween, his second is a marked improvement on the lore building of the first, making Michael into a story that's more about nature versus nurture as opposed to the less than human but not quite supernatural figure he was in Carpenter's movie was a great idea on Zombie's part. And while Halloween 2 abandons a lot of logic and moves more into visceral and dream logic territory, it still manages to craft a tale that is about what violence looks like and the PTSD that violence leaves behind. Many of the choices in the movie are important to the feeling. Many criticize the intro for being a kind of gotcha, it's all a dream intro, but it feels in line with Zombie's sense of humor within his Halloween world. Violence is king, and like that quote that opens the movie, Michael Myers at this point is nothing but unbridled and animalistic rage. Zombie subjects the audience to the nightmare intro because that's an apt thesis statement for the rest of the movie. The way the movie is shot and edited aids in that sentiment. Zombie's Haddonfield feels very much his. The warehouse party, the strip club, the coffee shop Laurie Strode works at, it's all very much indebted to the work he did with the Firefly trilogy, especially House of a Thousand Corpses. Michael sometimes kills in jump cuts that make it seem like he has ghost-like speed, able to slip the knife in 24 times and disappear before you know it.
Zombie wants you to feel that palpable sense of paranoia and tension. In this sense, he has crafted a particularly terrifying piece of horror, and one that I believe unfairly gets shafted in the annals of the Halloween franchise. Halloween 2 is much better to me than all of the David Gordon Green movies, though I do need to return to those and see if I still feel that way after watching them again. But Halloween 2 also falls into territory of a movie that's ideas are much greater than the implementation of them on screen.
Still, the world of Halloween 2 oozes with the same grit and horror movie charm of the classics that Zombie beckons to. Part of the comfort of his movies, besides the awfulness of their subject matter, is that they so often pay homage to the classics we know and love. Rob Zombie is clearly a fan of horror, and in his interpretation of the genre should be considered amongst the classic horror directors. When Laurie donned the oversized mask at the end of Halloween 2, there was a catharsis that came over me. This was the theatrical cut ending where the original music cues in as we approach a long white-walled hallway, Laurie staring into the camera with a crazed look. This is how I sometimes feel inside with my grief, that I may never be able to pass the anger and rage inside of me, and that I will forever be carrying the pain and torture that I so often feel.
What initially led me to the topic of bad vibes in movies and what draws people and myself to them is that I went to see Alex Garland's Civil War. While not at all the same movie in some ways, there is this kind of kinship between Civil War and The Devil's Rejects that may not be readily apparent on the surface, but is there. They can both be considered road trip movies, with many scenes taking place in liminal spaces, such as gas stations, seemingly abandoned homes, and hotel lobbies.
There are some strange needle drops and musical choices in both films, adding a sense of fun and glee. This is staggering in the world of Civil War because Garland masterfully chooses to be journalistic even in how he shoots the movie. There's nothing persuading you one way or the other. You are shown the carnage in raw detail. The encampments built within football stadiums, children running and playing while rocket shells fire off in the background. And while the main characters of Civil War are not at all like Otis, Baby, and Captain Spaulding, they're similar in their strange addiction to chasing danger. Lee, Joel, Jesse, and Sammy are interconnected only for one reason: to chase the story at all costs. Sure, Garland makes us like them and shows they become a ragtag family of their own, but at the end of the day, they only want to get that glorious shot of the president pinned down in the Oval Office. Otis, Baby, and Captain Spaulding have the opposite. They desire nothing, complete hedonists driven only by their need to disrupt. And to me, it seems like our Civil War characters may have more in common with our Firefly family than we may like to admit. Civil War also often feels bad. It's frightening, especially as an American. In the way that The Devil's Rejects faces you with the brutality of American violence, Civil War shows you just how similar the real America is to what's happening on screen in Garland's movie. Both films aim to capture their own vision, but at the end of the day, it's an unpleasant vision to sit with. As we watch Kirsten Dunst Lee risk her life to save Kaylee Spaney's Jesse, it's like watching the Firefly family go out in a barrage of gunfire at the end of Rejects. What is really being saved but an image, an idea, or a narrative?
Movies exist for many reasons. Sometimes they exist to inform or persuade. Some exist solely as aesthetically pleasing works of art. Directors like Ari Aster often make pretty amazing pieces of work, but those come with a certain queasiness. Still, you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who wasn't moved at least a little bit by Hereditary. Bad vibes does not necessarily always mean bad movies. There's an exorcism that can come from watching a great bad vibes movie, even if you don't feel that great during or after it. I happen to find solace in movies like Child's Play 2, The Devil's Rejects, and Halloween 2. So, from me to you, it's okay if your favorite movies make you feel sick. It's okay if your favorite movies take you and its characters to dark places. Sometimes you have to trudge through the darkness in order to get back to a place of light. And sometimes it's okay to just sit in those murky shadows and let yourself sink further and further into darkness. What it means to heal is different for everyone. But the movies, for me, will remain a safe place for me to move through and experience my intense emotions and live vicariously through some of our greatest and most depraved characters. This has been another episode of Curtis Reviews. Thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart for watching. Before you go, please don't forget to like and subscribe, as it does really help out our channel. I hope to see you very soon in our next video, and until next time, peace. Sometimes you have to trudge